And so I'm grateful for all of the work you've done here for many years, bringing extensive clinical and leadership experience into your classrooms, including work in primary care, behavioral health, corrections, and chemical dependency treatment. You're currently a chemical dependency specialist, mental health clinician, and you're currently serving as a director of a co-occurring substance use and mental health treatment facility here in Seattle. Um, Dr. Max also holds an MBA in healthcare management and focuses on strengthening business and systems side of clinical care, which to me is meaning that you're bringing this Antiochian work of our mission out into the community in ways that really do change systems and the way that we diagnose and think about work with clients. And for most of our students who are psychology oriented, trauma-informed care and other ways of thinking about being with people are critical to seeing our wishes for systemic change to become real. So thank you both for being here. This is more of an introduction than we usually do at Messy, but I want to share this background with you to let you know who your faculty are. And while week one, you might get to hear a little bit about this, today you're going to hear a little bit more about how the issues that students have brought up in messy conversations are going to be front and center in their classes, along with their expertise and years of study and work in their communities. So if I could do something that we often do in classes, which is to start with a question about how does your identity shape the way that you show up in the classroom and in your field? Who would like to start?
Um, I don't mind if Mary Lou, if you're fine
Oh,
with
that's fine. Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh this is such a big question. I think as a clinician, we start learning about ethics and modalities and what we say versus what we don't say, what we bring versus what we don't bring into a clinical setting. And then as a lecturer, um, there's always risk in presenting who you are. And, I come from two collectivistic backgrounds. My father, may he rest in power, was, Black from the South and dealt with Jim Crow South and, died at the age of 90 last year. And my mother is an immigrant from the Philippines. And then there was me, right? So I came bopping into this world, trying to straddle these two cultures, two very different backgrounds in a very independent American setting. And surprisingly, I think of what a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to biraciality or multiraciality, um, it is very difficult, even when you were born on American soil. It is very difficult to find um, a sense of identity and purpose because we live in a world that needs to put things in finite boxes that are very dichotomous. It's this or that. I mean, and I'm sure my colleague Mary Lou, there's a lot of awareness of like the brown bag rule, or this idea that according to the census, you identify when you're a person of color as what your father is, right? So growing up, I was identified as Black. And interestingly, it wasn't until I got to Seattle about 15 years ago that I learned about my identity and who I wanted to be and how I would show up in different spaces. So, interestingly, I thought I had to be one or the other, and I wasn't sure what folks here on the Pacific Northwest would make of me. And that was really important, especially as I never envision myself getting into post-secondary education and teaching, and I didn't know if my experience was something real to offer. And that is just transparent and very raw, because growing up, scholars were the folks that had their heads and their noses in the books, and experience was way too qualitative, right? It wasn't as quantifiable, it wasn't as documented, and oh, you're the only one experiencing this. And over the years, I've been at Antioch, and Sarah Beth, I actually love that you've dated us, right? Like you have dated who we are. We are such Antiochians, the three of us, that I could sort of trace, especially when we moved into the newer building. Um, but I learned over time, my experience actually matters, and how I show up in the classroom matters, and that students actually really took to what I had to say and what I was going through, because it really adds color to the outline of what you read in a book, right? Um, how I identify matters. Seeing a person of color, seeing a person who has had to navigate through extremely difficult circumstances. And I'll be the first to say, I grew up pretty privileged. I did. And growing up privileged in predominantly white spaces, as a person of color who's highly educated, who's also a single mom, is oftentimes really confusing for so many people, so they don't know what to make of you. I approach my classes with all that I am. I don't hold back. I'm pretty blunt. And so for those of you who are my students, when you get to know me, I'm pretty raw, because I don't believe in sugarcoating what the world is. In essence, I've always felt as if the educational environment should really be a microcosm of what you will be facing out in the real world. Um, but also that we are connected, and that we, have a safe space for individuals to explore who they are. Because on this journey, especially as psychology students, this is actually really scary. We don't oftentimes realize how much power we hold as the talkers, right? Sometimes we're not taken seriously as the clinicians, because we have deferred so much to allopathic and osteopathic medicine, that we forget that what we bring to the table, how we narrate, how we help people identify and reframe who they are, is really potent and really, really important to share and learn. History was not passed down through vials, it was passed down through word of mouth, and it was inscribed. And we are the scribers of the past, present, and future. And so I bring my background, my culture, my values, my wisdom. I also bring what I don't know, and I ask a lot of questions, and I learn about who people are, and I stay ready to learn. And I tell students all the time, I learn so much from you
Mhm.
about who I am. And I don't know that that level of humility penetrates across um, education circles all the time, right? We are very used to a society where it's very top down, very Foucauldian, but I think, a greater instructor, and my identity is more solidified because of what I share and the feedback that I get. And so I realize that this is a pretty circuitous way of saying things, but I bring all that I am into my courses, and sometimes all that I am shifts and changes based on culturally and historically what's happening, and how we're situated in place and time.
Thank you so much, Max.
Yeah.
Mary Lou, how about you?
Oh my. Thank
Mhm.
you, Dr. Max. That was wonderful. Um, well, just to say to start, so I grew up in the Seattle area. My family had a small business that I worked in starting when I was a teenager. I went off to college, and this was the civil rights generation. And so there was a call for students to come and work in the civil rights movement. And I was called to that really out of my church experience, if you can think of church as Martin Luther King meant it and not as lots of other people mean it, that if you're serious, um, you respond to the call. And the other thing that I really think now that I was affected by was, I'm that was a long time ago. Um, we were very close to World War II, and the stories of the French resistance against Hitler were really a part of our experience. And we used to ask ourselves, well, would we have been brave enough to be in the French resistance? You know, and so the civil rights call fit into that category. It's like sometimes things are really tough and you get called to be there. And so I feel like that I was one of many, many white students, and of course, many also students of color who responded to that call. And I ended up not in the South at that point because of the timing of things, but in Chicago on Martin Luther King's staff in Chicago. And I went there to be in this church project. I had no idea what I thought I might be end up tutoring kids. I didn't know what I was going to do. But it turned out that I ended up in the middle of the movement. And so that was a very powerful experience for me. And when you were talking, Dr. Max, about learning from experience, I think that really was a very powerful moment for me because um, there were that experience I carried with me. Um, and if my professors didn't get it, I knew that they didn't get it, you
Right.
know. It, um, so it was very when I bumped into Antioch with its focus on learning from experience, that fit very much my own sense of things. Um,
Yeah.
so um, so that really was a formative moment for me. And even though I was just for a year, and then it was kind of the rise of Black Power, a Black um, uh, one. There was the space for people who were, I'm going to say white, and I don't really know if they extended beyond white because we had people who were of Mexican families backgrounds, and um, it was time to not be in the movement. It was like a black coalescence, and one of my black friends said to me, um, "We have to know that we can do it ourselves." And so I felt it was the right thing to step back in that time. Um, and so um, later on, um, so I did some other things, some other nonviolence training through another group, women's studies, in the very beginning of when we called it women's studies before it was gender studies. Um, so we went on to take the experience that came out of the civil rights movement and really spread to other groups, starting with women and then what we called then gay rights. It's got lots of names now, but that's what it was back in the beginning. Um, that whole sense of people claiming their rights was really a surge that started out of the civil rights movement and spread throughout the society in many different ways, and we're still dealing with that. So I would say that's been really formative for me, and how um, how that how I take that into class. Um, One of the other things I learned from the civil rights movement, of course, was what people do matters, you know, and that we can, if there are difficult situations out there, if we can organize around it, if we can work with it, we can make change. So my generation and the whole number of decades that I've been active, we have been able to make change, and we're now dealing with this big backlash. And so I'm trying to grapple with what my students are confronting as they're living through the backlash to what we did over the last 60 years. Um, Including efforts to take back voting rights, which people fought very hard for in the 60s. Um, so um, And I
Mary
would,
Lou, would you connect what you're sharing with more of your class content? And for those who may not be able to attend your class, I think they would maybe want to hear some of the gems that you're going to try to bring to students with, if you would. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. This is good. Um, so I would say there's a couple of things. One of them is reframing U.S. history, and I prefer to call it U.S. history because we're talking about the United States. We're not talking about all the Americas. I don't think we get to claim that. Um, so with the first of all, a sort of multicultural perspective, in to be literal. I mean, that hardly covers it, but that's a starting place. And so I found some good places. So we start with Native Americans. If you want to start with who discovered America, we start with 20,000 years ago in the Native Americans and pull that piece of the story in. I'm working a lot with the Spanish, his Mexican order, which is not usually told as part of U.S. history, but actually started before well, before the Pilgrims, like by a long way in the 1500s. So, and the way that Mexicans, many of them are Latinos, but Mexicans particularly are relevant to us because of the border and lots of complications there. Um, we're part of they were part of Mexico until like 150, 170 years ago. And so who crossed which border? Where did this border come from? And why do we think that we can throw out people who were already here? You know, so and there's a strong indigenous connection with many Mexican families. And so that's another piece of the story that I want to be really clear about, that many of those people who are, quote, labeled Mexican, there's a whole, this Latin America is similar, but because of the Mexico is on the border and we've had this complicated relationship with Mexico, I think that takes a certain precedence for us to cope with. Um, so anyway, that's another piece of it. Um, so trying to reframe history in that way, and also dealing with um, anti-sexism, as well as anti-racism, anti-heterosexism, we could call it. That's part of it. Um, and then I think also, as we think about racism, we also need to talk about what we're for. We know we're against racism, but what is it we're trying to be for? And so we need to talk about um, both multicultural democracy, which I'm not totally comfortable with that term. I don't think it's quite big enough, but at least that's like a starting place. Um, and then a decent life for everyone. So, what does that mean? And really, how a decent life for everyone is what democracy is about. That's why we elect representatives, so they can do what we need them to do. And so, this is not an accident. There wasn't elected. I mean, we were reading in the class some of the things from the quote founding fathers, which that's a complicated story, but they were really clear that they didn't want to have a tyranny. And so, how can we set this up so no one person can actually have too much power? And how can we avoid tyranny? And that's still a question that we're facing. So I will also say about my class, I've taught this class before a number of times, but I'm thinking about it right now. What is the history that people need to know in this historic moment? And one thing I think is the civil rights movement history is the most important. And it's because it's particularly in the South. People were facing what was kind of an authoritarian society. I mean, we don't usually use that name for it, but sometimes I've called it a reign of terror, that people risk their lives if they were trying to vote. And so what can we learn from the stories of people who were able to break through that story? So I think those stories are really important right now. Um,
I know you've also said that your subject matter area that you've brought to your classes is very heavy in sociology, but we're hearing the history piece and the relational history of especially of movements. And so I think that is making me think about the connection between what you're bringing to your class this quarter, Max, and how systems and power live in counseling modes, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
counseling practices, and that
Mhm.
history and that sociology that influences your way of bringing that material to students, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. This could be a series, I tell you. I mean, when we look at I'm teaching a course called Contemporary Modes of Counseling, and I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. We then talk about contemporary, because in essence, we have to modify it over time to be culturally sound, right, and inclusive. But many people don't know the history of counseling and the genesis of counseling born out of the medical model, and there were so many sacrifices on behalf of people of color, indigenous, peoples, and, disenfranchised and marginalized groups that contributed to the science, the behavioral science that we have today. It's really interesting because I have, when I was looking over the syllabus for this course before I sort of revamped it, it's like, oh man, this is actually a lot harder to teach at Antioch for some reason because Antioch is so social justice forward, and I wanted to make sure that I continue to be values aligned there. But um, I'm really looking to infuse many truths behind the history of the choice of modality, right? That there's a very dark past to counseling. There's still a very dark present. The idea that evidence-based practice is such a highly political term that we don't often think about. Many people think evidence-based, we think of insurance. We don't look at sort of the inherent evils behind that and how our own practice as clinicians actually deter and create barriers for people that actually need our help. And I want to talk about that. I want to dialogue about that. I want us to dive right into the ethics code that our field has put out as a roadmap and how to conduct ourselves as stewards of good clinical care. But I also want to remain truthful. Many of these evidence-based approaches and modes of counseling that we're talking about were not normed on people of color. They were not normed on women. They were not normed on anyone in the LGBTQ plus community. They were not normed on people that are marginalized. And so, in essence, we play with the idea of moving away from the standardized approach and flipping it on its head and having it make sense and risking the fidelity of the model. And so there's always this inherent question and this risk management aspect part, which I think that's where like my MBA ties into. It's very interesting, right? When I look at healthcare from the business perspective, and then I have my clinical hat over here. It is two very different worlds, and I infuse both. Um, how do we do what is ethically uh, right? Because we do not have a unified, codified definition of that term. How do we do right by our clients, by our students? How do we teach them in a way that A, doesn't put us out of work and out of positions where we can continue to relay this material, but does aid in helping them to create and make autonomous decisions about their practice? Um, and how do we do so? And you brought up the term, because I talked about moral injury, and I think this is a huge piece for many of you that don't know about moral injury. It was a term born out of the VA and healthcare workers who were always talking about burnout and burned out and burned out. And I think we have used this as a colloquial term for so long. But a lot of literature talks about how burnout puts the onus on the individual. The reason you are burned out is because there's something you are doing wrong or something that you are not doing. Morally injurious aspects of healthcare, especially, are when we are not values aligned, right? So the institution that you're working for is saying, we want you to do all this great work, but we're not going to pay you for it, right? And we only want you to use this modality, and you could only serve this many people, and oh, this is the script. But you're like, but I came into this with the notion that I would actually be able to help people. It's like, well, we get to define what help is. And so you are stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you're trying to make an educated, informed decision that puts you in a space where you wonder, and this has happened to me over the course of my career. Do I want to continue to do this? And is there a platform in which I can actually truly be myself, still adhere to the ethics and the moral and legal aspects of my career, but also be a pioneer for change? And so when we're looking at these different modes of counseling, it's not quite just here's the script, these are the lines, here's what you do. Remember that you're working with people, and people, their moods, their behaviors, what they're navigating, it's all in flux. And so, how do we carefully hold their hearts in their hands, but also push for change? And how do we do that in a culturally mindful way? And how do we also remain inclusive? But also, how do we ensure that we are true to ourselves, and we learn how to strategically disagree in a way that doesn't come across as disrespectful? And also, and also, and also. And I can tell you right now, in the many years that I have been doing this work, I don't know that I think I call myself the expert at nothing. And I mean that so in such a loving way, and in a way that is so humbling, because I thought, oh, you know what, I learned cognitive behavioral therapy, A plus B equals C. And the problem is, the person in front of you is like, I have no idea what B and C are, and I don't adhere to that. And then you're like, oh, crud. So now I got to, okay, so we're going to go into DBT. And they're like, what do you mean my thoughts are crazy? And you're like, oh, crap. Right. So, and then next thing you know, motivational interviewing. Why are you asking me so many questions? And then you're like, I'm just trying to do my job. And how do you strategically navigate this? And I can tell you, it not to scare you into getting out of this field, but rather, here's the truth about what you might face. So you better have more than a hammer in your toolbox, and you better learn to consult. And you better find some colleagues that you can rely on and trust. And so all of these things, when we talk about, modes of counseling, it's not just the mode of counseling. It is the support network that you surround yourself by. It's the consistency. It is constantly keeping up with cultural trends in the field. It is constantly being self-directed to educate yourself and the public. And it's also, it's also about having enough thick skin to roll with that resistance, because you will encounter resistance in this field. And if not by your clients, by the individuals in power that dictate to you, who you are to be, who sign off on your checks, who tell you, that these are the courses that you're going to be teaching, and these are the students, and this is the population, and this is how we want it taught. So there are so many pieces that are wrapped up in teaching this course that we could spend an entire year and break this into a four-part series, and it still wouldn't be enough to really capture the depth of this. But have scaled it back to a point where you all will not be super irritated with me, and that it's a little more than, as I've told my students, I want you to think of it as a survey class. You're dipping your toe and maybe occasionally your foot into the water, and really seeing what this field is like. And what you'll find at the end of the day is the mode doesn't matter. It really doesn't. But the relationship does.
Thank you so much, Dr. Max. I
Yeah.
mean, you laid out all the systemic parallels to Mary Lou's work as well, right? how we grapple with the work as it's been written, as it's law, how we turn a system upside down in looking at what is failing us. Mary Lou, if you wouldn't mind speaking to, how these issues are important in the work that you do in the community with the experience you had, the organizing. I imagine burnout was part of your experience at times. I imagine you encounter resistance at times. And how does this live in the classroom, if you wouldn't mind? Yeah.
Well, thank you for all of that. Well, it made me it took me back in one way to the early days of women's studies when I was teaching at the University of Puget Sound. There were just a few of us. I mean, we were doing part-time work. And we got brought in because the students had an uproar, and the faculty and the administration said, "Okay, we'll have one class," and then we said another class, and then we wanted another class. But we had these weird things like um, the faculty from the chemistry department on the committee saying to us, "You want another class about women?" And we said, "Well, we are half the population." And it was like they hadn't. So there's like that layer of it bumping up at institutions and insist and really to notice that the university began teaching classes about women at all because students made an uproar about it. So that was one thing. And because they
And
didn't,
still, what we read mostly in these fields is written by men years and years and years and years ago.
that's right.
So I
That's right.
love that you're bringing this in because it is the way of putting these puzzles together with
Yeah.
more complexity and more completeness. Yeah.
And and there has been a lot. I mean, there's more women's voices. There's more voices of people of color than there used to be, but um, it's not like this problem is solved either.
Yeah.
So that's what I hear from Dr. Max is that you're bumping up against these institutional frameworks that um, so I think that figuring out how we bump up against them and wiggle wiggle past them some kind of way or whatever, and we have to figure out how to navigate it. And I really appreciate what you're saying about helping students be ready for that.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
and Mary Lou, I really appreciate because I think this is an important part of like our pre-discussion about this. Um, it's super important, I think, as faculty that we support one another
mhm,
through this, right? As like a person of color, and then Mary Lou, you know how you said you identified as white. Um, we are each creating platforms for our students differently.
mhm,
And it's important that we recognize we are both, and then you as well, Sarah Beth. I mean, we are all educators and we are in alignment, but the platforms we're able to provide are going to look different. Like as a person of color, right? I don't have the same ability. Although I think times are shifting and changing with Antioch, there's more of that ability to do so. Um, but I love that you use your platform to talk about civil rights. I think it reaches an audience in a very different way. And I think it's beautiful, um, especially with your experience in the movement. And I just want to give just I want to give a lot of gratitude for what you do because um, I think as a colleague, it's important to see the allyship that in essence we are modeling and scaffolding for our students. And so thank you. I thank you for that.
well, thank you. Thank you. And it's an ongoing, I think you were conveying this too. It's an ongoing struggle. It's like, what's the next thing we have to deal with, in the history class right now, I mean, we have going through this interesting process of the government trying to erase history
Hmm.
and have it be only a certain way. And
Hmm.
so it's made me think about, okay, what is the history they want to erase? Because that's probably the history we really need to learn.
Right.
And so, um, and there's a wonderful story that we teach in some of our classes about Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old high school student in Montgomery, Alabama at the time of the bus boycott in the 1950s. And she actually was one of the people prior to Rosa Parks who was kicked off the bus because she refused to give up her seat
Mm-hmm.
to a white person. And those crazy bus rules they had, you know. This was okay for her to sit down for a while, but then when a white person wanted a seat, she was supposed to get up. And she refused, and she got, um, and she said later on, she said they'd been studying Black history in class, and she said Sojourner Truth had her hand on one shoulder and Harriet Tubman on the other. They weren't going to let me move, you know. And it was like, why do we need to teach Black history? Well, there it is, you know. So um, anyway, I think the history of struggle is a really, really important one. Um, just to finish her story, she, they decided not to have the bus boycott around her getting arrested because she was a young person and they thought that it would be too much struggle for her. And so they waited for her, they waited for Rosa Parks. But she was in the court case that actually won the desegregation of the Montgomery buses. So anyway, there's a little piece of history that's not very well known.
Yeah.
But I love to talk about it with younger people because um, it's a high school story. So um,
Yeah.
it's um, and I want to speak a little bit to the LGBTQ movement that's being suppressed. And, someone just mentioned to me about taking down the rainbow flag off of the Stonewall Inn where the big moment began of the modern um, movement around gay rights. It's like, so why do we have this flag up there? Where did
Mhm.
it come from? Why do they want it down? So those are the kind of questions. It's like, what's going on here? Um, that I anyway, those are some of the kinds of ways where I feel like we're in a history class, we're dealing with things that are happening now. And so
Mhm.
it's not just history. Uh,
Mhm.
and what the history that we have access to has an impact on what we're able to do. That's what I think about that with your students, Dr. Max. I'd be
Mhm.
curious about how that works for you. Um, I'm just um, I'm remembering um, the early book on Black feminism, where she talked about um, that Black people tended to trust experiential knowledge more than book
Yes.
because so
Yes.
much book knowledge was so negative, was written out of a racist perspective.
Well, we also, for Black Americans, many of our experiences were tied to the church, and many of the experiences we had with church, were were story based, right? The way that the Holy Spirit moves.
Mhm.
I grew up in the church. My father was a pastor.
Oh,
And so many of the stories that were passed down were, no pun intended, gospel to our communities.
yeah.
But that's also how we were able to preserve the little bit of the culture and not a whole lot of the language, right, was through storytelling, narration, dance,
Mhm.
especially during, slavery times.
Mhm.
And even now, Black communities will oftentimes get together and share stories, and there's always some weird iteration of the story, and we all start to laugh, right? It's the game of telephone, but there's always that core aspect of the story. I call it the hallmark, you know, of the story. And so, um, interestingly, the way that some of this shows up with contemporary modes and just courses that I've taught over the years at Antioch and other institutions, um, counseling is strange in this way that we're not directly hitting history on the head, but we would be remiss, if we did not speak about the history, because counseling has a way of trying to left, right, center. It's very, this can work across groups of people.
Hmm.
And then you have like us freedom fighters that are like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
We do not put a square peg in a circular hole, right? No. Um, but over the years, I mean, I've taught like psychometrics and psychological assessments and psychodiagnostics, and um, I think students come out more informed about stuff that they didn't think that they'd be informed about. Um, with the DSM-5, anyone in my past courses that knows me is I say the DSM-5 is a glorified table lift. And I think it's great um, when you need a reference, and we use the diagnostic codes for assessments, but we are so behind the times in comparison to the ICD-9, which is used internationally, and it's used in the big hospital systems. And if you've never taken a look at the ICD, it is way more comprehensive. There's some diagnoses in there that I have found to be quite hilarious, honestly, like shark bite. Like, what? Um, but it is quite a task to tease out um, what is politicized and what is glamorized in this field versus what I should stick to in terms of my syllabus and the like a K-crap, um, K-crap and the requirements there. And especially when it comes to cultural inclusivity and individuals of different backgrounds, right? Because I am not going to claim to know everything about every marginalized group. Heck, being part of two marginalized groups, I'm still figuring myself out. I say I am under construction at all times, right? So it's a forever learning process, but sometimes it shows up in personalities and what students want to learn.
Hmm.
And it can be difficult when you have the mentality of, I was here to learn this one thing,
Yeah.
and now you're teaching me this thing. And institutions, if we talk about history, it- you know, elementary, middle school, secondary, and post-secondary education now, especially in the state of Washington, has been called to be more apolitical. Amongst staff, we're not supposed to be talking about what's going on now. I think in the coven that we are, we're going to talk about the real issues, but we risk it, right? We risk it when we talk about DEI. We risk it by having these messy conversations because we understand the inherent value
Yeah.
and the need to protect our own. But it shows up in very different ways, whether it be individuals not being ready to have these conversations, folks from different walks of life. There has to be, in essence, a subscription. There has to be a buy-in by students and faculty to have these conversations.
Mhm.
To say that we want to be inclusive of LGBTQ plus, individuals and be allies, we have to subscribe to the idea that they exist for us. And I know that's a harsh truth, but if we don't have individuals that believe in Black rights, that don't believe in women's rights, and don't acknowledge that these are issues, we can't get them to do the buy-in.
Hmm.
So it starts with acknowledgement and acceptance. And acceptance does not necessarily mean agreement,
Hmm.
but that is one of the biggest things I've grappled with. I can't talk about gay rights if there are individuals in my classroom that don't believe that there are people who are gay. And it sounds silly because of the time that we're placed in.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, I have had experiences
Yeah.
with folks who are like, Dr. Max, you know that slavery wasn't a thing. I'm looking around for anyone that will hear this tomfoolery. And what do you do with that? Right? So I think that is a huge part of our job. It's almost like we have to educate. As a woman of color, I constantly feel that pull. Well, what do you mean that that was real? Slavery ended. What do you mean? Like we're not racist in the United States. There are more black people that have jobs. Dr. Max, you're a black professor.
Mhm.
What does that have to do with the tea in China? I don't understand. That statement does not verify or validate that there is not a phenomenological issue that is going on. And so I think that's how it shows up. And so it's a constant battle of how much do I want to try and educate you and convince you? And then on your side, how receptive are you going to be? And I realize that's harsh
Yeah.
to say, but it's a truth.
Yeah.
I think you're bringing up one of my favorite pieces about our Antiochian strategies and teaching, and I'll be honest, I didn't even understand this until I'd been teaching here for many years, was let's teach the issues as we see them, as we are scholars, as we are professors, as we are faculty, as we are uh, providing guidance to students in their own grappling with their critical thinking, with their values, with their life experiences and all of that. And then also let's talk the other side of this coin. Let's talk about what resistance there is to what I'm saying. Let's talk about what other paradigms and worldviews exist.
Yeah.
Let's teach to all the ways, all of the different sides or the roundness of an issue that makes it hard to do that. And that's why we are asking students to engage in class. That's why, as nice as it is to go off camera, which I love to do myself, because it can be helpful, especially when you're eating or when you
Right.
just need a break. When we know each other and we can see each other, and as ableist as that can be, even in saying it, it is the way that we've been oriented to being together before Zoom, was
Yeah.
being in a space with each other where we could hear each other's voices, we could listen to each other's stories, and we could learn from each other. And now it's more complicated. We have to do more work with each other to hear each other. We can easily just turn off the screen, turn off the channel, turn off that whatever so and so said that I didn't like in our minds. But to stay with it and to explore with it, I think is the work you're both talking about in so many different ways of bringing your full self to issues that might not be at the top of your list of learning in this particular class. But they're things that are related to history, that are related to policy, that are related to practices, and that are more and most importantly related to people's lives and their survival and living beyond survival as well. I know that we have Rosa has a couple questions, and I see Holly's hand up. Rosa, would you like to start?
Yes. Hi
Thank
guys. I've been
you.
here very excited, not visually present, but very excited about this conversation. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate how you bring critical perspectives to your classes in the things that matter the most so that students take that as a toolbox with them. So it's not the content itself, it's more the ways of thinking around things that you are pointing out. And I really appreciate it. So from that perspective, me from my own faculty practice, my own teaching practice, I tend to go to acknowledge that language plays the fundamental role of addressing things. So language addresses things, frames them, names them, and internalizes them. We internalize because of the language, and then assumptions is the learned language, all that stuff, right? So just thinking about this innocently, I don't know what innocently is the word, but it's just more like spontaneously based on the inspiration that you brought to my mind, is that there are like these two words in your fields that are always there and will always be there, or seem to always have been there, but maybe those two words need to be questioned as words, probably change. One is therapy.
Mm,
The
mhm,
word therapy, if you go to the roots of the word therapy, is very condescending.
mhm,
Is
mhm.
I'm gonna heal you.
Yes,
Therapy involves the idea that the light is gonna come from me to you, and it's gonna bring all that colonial element that I'm not gonna go there, right? Because it's self-explanatory, right? That's what
right.
the other one is civil rights. And civil rights, when I was listening to you, Mary Lou, this extraordinary journey that you had from the French resistance to understanding that, to live those moments, to understand what it means. The issue with civil rights right now is has been vilified. Just the concept has been
Mhm,
vilified. Right now it's in the, yeah. And then what can be done at the language level to reframe and rename the concept of civil rights, for because we're at the quarter of the 21st century now, almost towards the half of the 21st century. There's a lot of people that never have no clue of what is the 20th century issues that you brought up,
Mhm.
and they might not read them very soon anywhere, right? But what if there's a way to reframe the concept of civil rights without throwing the essence, of course, but something more like addressing the lived realities that are contemporary to us right now in the quarter of the 21st century, that are very different from the 60s. So the 60s, we are standing on the shoulder of the 60s.
Mhm.
But in terms of language, civil right doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
mhm.
The wording, just the wording, not the concept. Okay?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about, if we are now in digital environments, if we are now in this strange legal framework where everybody sues everybody for any reason, and the education itself being under threat, that is historically unheard of. There our ancestors would like education is under threat, is wrong, it's politically incorrect. So all those things it is so extreme, the kind of situation that I was thinking that requires at the language level, again going back to the assumption, the language,
Mhm.
Yeah.
like some kind of rethinking of the wording itself. And
Yeah.
then I was thinking about access and participation rights, like, and name
Mhm.
it as it is, because then everybody feels included and no one feels like who can vilify the idea of access and participation rights.
Whew, I don't have enough coffee to answer your question, so I'm going to take a stab. I love this with all my heart.
And I'm not expecting answers. I just wanted to contribute to the
Yeah.
to the to the excitement of your topics, guys, that you brought
Yeah.
up. And I know I acknowledge that it's 12:58.
No, I'm
But
here. Oh my gosh, can I say I love this? And you can't internally see my excitement, but I'm throwing glitter in here. I am having a great time. Um, Fair. My first response is that is fair. The word therapy is Grecian, right? So we look back like prior to the Hellenistic era, it's therapeia meant to attend to care for. And I
Mhm.
think the word that you said, this is kismet that you did that, and I don't think you realized you did that. It was innocent enough at that point to attend to others. Where we got lost is where you move stuff into the future and then people think that they know all the things and we get ported into the medical system, right? Where if you look at true, like the history of allopathic medicine, once again, top down, it is based on treating symptoms. And so therapy, the term therapy also shifted and changed over time. And then it became very much like the concept of research, which is also a bastardizing term, right? Anyone that's read Decolonizing Methodologies, if you're from Antioch and you haven't read it, Smith, Decolonizing Methodologies, this idea that, and that I don't have a great word for it, but research participants or individuals that we are observing, the very nature of who they are shifts and change when they are watched. A therapeutic relationship, once again, a misnomer, right? What term would I use? I don't know. I don't know. And I have some pretty funky ideas in this brain of mine, but you sort of tap on a bigger issue that once again we have to get folks to do a buy-in. I don't think that there are many people that argue about the term therapy right now. I think what they're arguing about is what is happening and what are the injustices happening in a therapy session. And I'm with you, but we're also on a very different level to think about things this way. Even the word counseling assumes that there is a power dynamic, that I am here to give you some sort of advice or direction, and that I will somehow acquire knowledge to be the expert of your life. Um, I, to educate is also top down, right? It means that there is a master or there is an individual that is an expert that is directing and providing information. I think that we are at the mercy of limitations of the confines of language. And so I don't know that there's a great term, and I agree. So, dialectically, I am with you, and I wish that I don't know, I wish I had the sparkle power to figure out a better term, but I do agree that we do need a term, or we need series of terms to accurately reflect. The problem with that is if you think about like critical race theory, we can change it today and it will be irrelevant tomorrow.
Mhm.
So,
I would say that what inspired me, that comment that I made, disguised as question or question disguised as comment, is more like I appreciate the way you deconstruct things, and if you model how you deconstruct it, you
yeah.
probably cannot change the word or invent a new word, or maybe you would collectively in time, like as a
Beyonce did
collective,
it.
yeah, but the construction, I think in front of the students, like I'm trying to break this apart and put it apart and making sense of it with this kind of humility, and that I think that in itself is a toolbox that you guys are doing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just playing
I,
around with language. That is my favorite sport.
and you're so good at it. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
bringing that in. We are past one, which is time when some folks leave. We're in a different place today. And I know we can continue this conversation for a few minutes if we like. I um, I think about this shift, the semantic shift, and the practical shift that is relevant to both of the courses of study that you're undertaking with students this term, and that is being with. I don't think about counseling anymore as the top down, the therapeutic. I think that things happen between people,
Mhm.
and a movement happens between people. Change happens between people. And yet it takes a lot of effort on our parts to initiate, to listen, and to be with. So that's the term that I use with students when I talk about counseling role and therapy, because for a lot of reasons. And one of those is because of the social movements that students bring into our classes to talk about. How does this relate to this identity? How does this relate to this struggle? And so I think if it's okay, I'd like to close us with one last question that Dr. Max, you brought up, and that is, how do we stay grounded in empathy without losing ourselves in this work? So there we go.
I'm gonna let Mary loose. Give
Well,
me a second.
um, that's kind of a spiritual question to me.
Mhm.
That how do we stay in the space of love, which is another word for empathy in a sense, and that's a practice that we need to find ways to do in whatever framework works for us. Um, somebody one recently, the thing I read said, "Love wins,"
Yes.
and Uh, that I think is something to keep in mind, that in the end, that's what works. And that all the rest is the paraphernalia that we go through to try to come to that space.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll stop with that. Thank you.
I think that's beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree. And of course, it's the question that is one of the most challenging for me to answer, but I reflect on myself, my practice, and what I encourage others to do. We can stay grounded by remaining humble. And I think humility is a huge aspect of our work, that we continue to be grateful and honor the grounds that and the lands that we are on, our predecessors, that we acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know, that there are fractional pieces of history. And no matter what is in books, we will never fully have the truth until, in this lifetime. And I say that because, you even think about the Bible, or you think about lost lands, lost languages. There's so much that we don't know, but that we remain humble, and we don't assume that we have all the information at our fingertips, even though social media and the interwebs and all of these things create a different kind of access to information. I think the sift that I was that yes, see, organically. What is the symbol now? This thing? I don't know. I'm learning about this thing. Um, but Mary Lou and I were talking about, it's as an educator, it's constantly going through the sift and looking through and for information that is relevant. So we're constantly having to educate ourselves for accuracies and inaccuracies, right? Because we could talk about Tutankhamun today and then realize, oh, actually, you know, you know, Tutankhamun was from Boston. Probably not, but just saying, you know. So it is
There's no one truth, in other words.
correct,
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think Holly had a word to say too
Yeah,
before.
go ahead, Holly. Oh, you're on mute. You wanna?
Oh, I didn't know I had. I think I just put something in the chat for people to engage with. When love leads, what do you notice?
Mm.
And yeah, I think I've just really enjoyed hearing your shares and what you bring to your class, and a lot stirred up for me around positionality. And one thing I just want to bring Lisa in for a moment. From positionality, one piece that I've really been thinking about is generational positionality, and like how we forget to talk about that. So I just really love Lisa for bringing her mom and bringing that intergenerational piece. But thank you, Elaine. I think I just was trying to wrap it up and give everybody a chance to think about what happens for them when they let love lead. And yeah, I think that's a really sweet note to land on.
Thanks, Holly.
I also threw a little flyer in the chat that does have the correct dates on it, along with our topics. So we will be here next week at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And as always, we will post on our website, and also we will upload this conversation on YouTube, so you can watch it for later. And as always, if you have any topics or questions or an idea for a messy conversation, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Dr. Max, and thank you, Dr. Mary Lou, and thank you, Dr. Sarah Beth. I really appreciate all that you bring and opening up the conversation and letting us get to know you a little bit more, and really getting to the juicy stuff that I could geek out on all day long. Thank you so much. And we will stop recording now, but if anybody needs to stay on for follow-up and questions, feel free to do so. Have a great day, everybody.